Welcome to the Archives of Legend and Lore. I am the KI GM, and every week I will bring a monster, humanoid, aberration, or some other being to the gaming table and put it in the spotlight, so to say. We'll discuss some of the lore, the differences in additions, and possible ways to use them in your one-shot or campaign. This time, we'll be engulfed in our studies, looking into our bowls at black pudding. No, not the kind you eat, the kind that eats you. Let's take a moment first and gather around for a chaos short story. Master Hammer was a renowned dwarven blacksmith, making the best armor and the best weapons, but unfortunately, as he grew in age, his body didn't have the dexterity it used to have, and younger smiths were starting to gain on him. He decided it was time he retreated to his mountain, a place he found quiet solace and refuge many times before. The path was dark, a constant cloud of ash covered the sun here. The path he walked had blessed his feet many times, but this time, a little bit of rock had collapsed. In the rubble he found an ancient door with glyphs carved into it. A large scratch was freshly carved through the glyphs, probably from one of the rocks. The door was open a crack. Never afraid of anything, he pushed the door open and lit a torch. The old cave was smooth, not carved by any tool he'd ever seen. Magic, he muttered. 2 torches were in sconces on the wall. He lit one and took the other. Never know how far down this place goes. It had been too long since he went on an adventure. Most of the humans he last explored with were long dead now. Even being older himself, his axe could be ready quicker than most. He almost burned for some action, so, with a smile, he headed down the cave. Every so often another torch was on the wall. He lit it and moved along. No markings or any signs of who made the cave could be found. It is always hard to tell the passage of time when underground, but he had figured it had only been a few hours since he was on the surface. His mountain was an active volcano, so the further he got, the warmer it was. A little bead of sweat was forming on his brow. Not at all uncomfortable, though. He liked the heat. The cave turned a short corner, and a simple wooden door was closed before him. He lit the torch on the wall, and never to be impolite, he knocked firmly on the door. He waited and heard nothing. "I'll be coming in if you don't mind," he loudly exclaimed. He waited patiently, and when no response came, after quite some time, he pushed the door open. The room slowly glowed and then was illuminated completely. He snuffed out his torch. "Now, I have to admit, sometimes magic does come in handy, just not for metalworking or stonework." The room was a little big to be a living space for just one person. You could fit his entire house in here at least 2 times over. He approved of the furnishings, though, sparse and only what was needed. A few wooden chairs, a table, a desk, quite a few bookcases, and a bed. The bookcases were full of books and a little dusty. The fireplace was a little odd. It had a strange material in the bottom of it and a handle on the side. No chimney arose from it, but it definitely looked like a fireplace regardless. He was curious, so much at times that people believed he had a little gnome heritage in him. He definitely assured them he did not. He reached out and turned the handle. The material at the bottom started to heat up quickly, and he felt warmth just like a fire. A small red glow could be seen in the metal on the bottom. It had to be lava piped into the space somehow. More useful magic, he thought, and already was thinking of ways to use it in his forging. He turned and went over to the desk. The top had papers covering most of it, and a small book. Next to the book laid a quill and a long-dried inkwell. The papers appeared to be in some arcane language with arrows and squiggly lines all over them. Opening the book, it looked like a journal, written in common, thank the gods. He grabbed the book and walked over to the table. He sat the book down on the table, and for the first time he noticed a chest on the floor. He opened the chest, and inside was a fresh turkey leg, some cheese, bread, and some water. He took out the turkey leg and sniffed it. It smelled like it was fresh, just out of the oven, and it even dripped fat. His mouth was watering so intently, he couldn't stop himself. "Just one bite." It was some of the best turkey he's ever had. Making quick work of it, he opened the chest, and the turkey leg was back. He smiled. More useful magic. At least his rations would be covered. Taking the chunk of cheese, he started to read the book while sitting in the chair. It appeared to be the journal of someone named Thros, and it was quite boring for most of it, until he talked about the monster he trapped. After many, many hours of research, he found this volcano was a lair of the one the ancient tribes called the World Ender, a reptilian-like beast that could not be killed. No matter the damage done to it, it just regenerated, and would kill until its voracious appetite had been quenched. Whole races had been known to be wiped out by the beast, and they would crawl back into the volcano and slumber for so many generations that few believed it was even real. Thros believed he could use an ancient binding scroll to trap it here, saving future races, and then doing many tests on it. Thros was skilled in 2 crafts. He was a very powerful mage, but he also knew the art of blacksmithing. Hammer almost dropped the book. He couldn't believe what he was reading. He'd never known someone with that particular skill set. It made him anxious to keep reading. It seemed Thros cut into the mountain itself until finding the beast. He could barely believe his eyes, finally seeing the mythical thing. He found no matter the noise he made, the thing never stirred. So he set up his wards and prepared to use the magic scroll. If he failed, he knew it would awaken and wreak havoc on the land, all being his fault. But it was worth the risk. Hammer pulled out another piece of cheese from the chest, never taking his eyes from the book. The next entry was scribbled, and hard to read at first. It read, "I'm drained. The scroll tapped into more of my injury than I thought I had. It was an absolute success, though. As I spoke the last words aloud, the thing's eyes shot open, and I saw true hatred in its scowl. I collapsed to the floor, and when I awoke, it was still staring at me. It had not moved. Now, on to the next step in my experiment." The next entry into the journal was the neatly penned writings Hammer was used to reading. After many weeks of rest, he had left to get the needed supplies, and when Thros returned, the thing was still trapped. The next part would test the binding. He had learned that the ancient races had found some bones from the beast and used them to make great and powerful items. Thros was going to use a black pudding in a special container to try and dissolve part of the beast off to gather its bones. The journal goes on to explain the process of how he did the collecting and how the leg would regenerate in a few days' time. The journal goes on to explain the process of how he did the collecting and how the leg would regenerate in a few days' time. The bones he found had been very strong and heat-resistant after curing, but then unworkable. The bones had to be worked, shaped, and tooled within 2 days, or they would harden and become somewhat indestructible as far as he could tell. He used his forge and anvil. Hammer stopped reading. Scanning the room, on the wall was a stone door, closed, just begging to be open. Hammer quickly put the book down and walked over to the door. A gentle push, and the massive door swung open. He almost cried for what was in the next room. The lights came on just like before, but this room was a marvel. Along one wall was a great furnace, with more of the material from the fireplace casing it, and more levers. In the center of the room was a great anvil made from that same material. Tools lined the walls, everything he ever wanted or needed in the trade. Along another wall lay components for weapons and armor, bindings, jewels, alloys, decorative items. The workshop was completely stocked. 2 more closed doors led out of the room. After taking inventory and almost crying several times, he went to one of the doors. It opened and more lights came on. The walls were lined with weapons. Swords, pikes, everything imaginable. In the center, lined up like a small army, stands full of armor faced towards him. The craftsmanship was amazing. He had never seen things like this before. His eyes took every piece in, examining, learning, and cataloging every detail on how it was made. Hammer turned and looked back into the other room, and that last closed door. He knew what lay in there, but he still had to see it. He walked over to the door, much more slowly than the other ones. The door felt colder than the others, but this could just be his mind playing tricks on him. He pushed the door open, and the next room illuminated. He was taken back by the size of the beast that lay before him. The reptilian skin, almost dinosaur-like. The massive eye opened and stared down at him with hope and relief. A table sat in the room, a little ways away from the thing. Hammer walked over to it, and sitting in a wooden rack was a glass object, half-moon in shape with a slide on one side. Inside, a black, thick liquid moved by itself back and forth. Still in his hands, he looked back up at the beast. Its eyes changed, and you could feel the hatred coming from it. Hammer replaced the glass object and headed back out to the table. He needed to study and ready himself if he was going to make the finest weapons and armor in the lands again. He would be a legend. The additions can jump between calling them puddings or oozes. We'll just call them puddings, but they are very similar. In 2nd edition D&D, they are called Deadly Pudding and come in different colors. We will stay with black for this episode, though. The color depicts where their biome is, black being any underground location. Puddings are actually a collection of cells that are voracious and scavenge or hunt for food. They typically inhabit ruins or dungeons, or maybe even ruined dungeons. I mean, why not? They have the ability to detect heat and analyze things from up to 90 feet away to determine if it's edible. They are immune to acid, cold, and poison. Wait, I know what it says, but other than the white, which is a form from the Arctic regions, in my games, they would be super weak to cold. I mean, think about pudding pops. It's frozen pudding. Cold, in my world, would affect their speed, slowing them down, possibly freezing them entirely. Okay, let's get back to the tomes. Lightning bolts and blows from weapons divide them into smaller puddings, each able to attack exactly as the original pudding. Fire causes normal damage, as does magic missiles. Puddings can ooze through cracks that are at least 1 inch wide and can travel at the same speed as if on a level surface, on ceilings and walls. Death from above! Puddings do not use all of their mouth openings, which cover most of their exposed surfaces, so the smallest pudding does the same damage as the largest. Wow. I mean, I guess if you're pudding, that's pretty awesome. 5th edition is very similar to 2nd. They can move through an area as narrow as an inch without even squeezing. They're most commonly found in the Underdark. The black puddings are very acidic and can eat through non-magical wood or metal in 1 round. Also, if a non-magical ammunition made of wood or metal hits it, after dealing damage, it's destroyed. Any non-magical weapon made of metal or wood that hits the pudding corrodes. After dealing damage, the weapon takes a permanent and cumulative -1 penalty to damage rolls. If the penalty drops to a -5, the weapon is destroyed. The pudding has spider climb, allowing it to climb walls and ceiling as easily as it does on the floor. They are immune to acid, cold, we already went over that, lightning, and slashing damage. They also have immunities to being blinded, charmed, deafened, exhausted, frightened, or knocked prone. I mean, I guess it'd be hard to tell which way's up, right? In 5th, they are blind beyond 60 feet, though, so a little different than 2nd edition. They can also split. When a pudding that is medium or larger is subjected to lightning or slashing damage, it splits into 2 new puddings, but only if it has at least 10 hit points. New puddings are 1 size smaller than the original pudding. Pathfinder is actually almost the same as 5th edition. They are most commonly found underground, searching for things to corrode and devour. The split action is exactly the same from what I've read, other than there is no size stipulation on it splitting. There are some differences in immunities. They are no longer immune to cold. Yeah, I know, right? Isn't that what I was saying? They are immune to acid, critical hits, mental attacks, I guess, piercing, precision, slashing, and being knocked unconscious. I mean, no crits, that kind of sucks. It has an ability called suction. Pretty much the same as spider climb or being able to walk on walls or ceilings. Well, that was a lot less interesting than I thought it would be. Weapons that strike it take acidic damage here also, but thrown weapons and ammunition take this damage automatically with no save. Like if you threw a rock gnome fighter at it. Gnome Ballista! This week, we are proud to be sponsored by Bards and Nobles. Are you looking for high quality books and scrolls? You can come into Bards and Nobles. We have all your literary needs. This month's specials are Potions and Such by Al Chemist. Al breaks down several concoctions and how to make them. Bards and Nobles, more than just parchment. Wow, our first normal sponsor. Kudos to whoever penned them in. Now, on to combat. In 2nd edition, it has just a melee attack, but black pudding acid is highly corrosive, much like my belch, inflicting 3 to 24 points of damage per round to organic matter and dissolving a 2-inch thickness of wood equal to its diameter in 1 round. Black puddings also dissolve metal. Chainmail dissolves in 1 round, plate mail in 2. Each magical plus increases the time it takes to dissolve the metal by 1 round. Thus, plate mail plus 3 takes 2 rounds to dissolve because it's plate mail, plus 3 rounds because it has the plus 3 magical bonus, for a total of 5 rounds. 5th edition calls it a pseudopod attack, and it does both bludgeoning and acidic damage. In addition, non-magical armor worn by the target is partially dissolved and takes a permanent and cumulative -1 penalty to the AC it offers. The armor is destroyed if the penalty reduces its AC to 10. A creature that touches the pudding or hits it with a melee attack within 5 feet of it takes acid damage also. Pathfinder has pretty much the same attacks as 5th, but with different values for the bludgeoning and acidic damage. Now, on to one of my favorite parts of the show. That's right, let's get our pens and paper, quills and parchment, or hammer, chisel, and tablet, I guess. It's time for the chaos to be unleashed, and the ideas to flow. Welcome to the Chaos Creative Corner. In the first scenario, the brave adventurers are delving deep into the unknown depths of the cave of I won't name it. Somewhere in the ancient tunnels lies a scroll that holds a binding spell that will forever trap the evil that threatens their lands. He who I shall not name is destroying the city your players call home. A wise sage, Nostra Nameless, has sent them here to retrieve the scroll. It has already seemed like it's been days since the sun warmed their skin, but ahead, far off in the distance, a light can be seen. The adventurers carefully make their way to a huge cavern. In the center, on a black obsidian altar, floats a scroll surrounded by light. Torches burn all around the island the altar rests on. Between them and the altar, one last obstacle. A black sea of water remains. A quick look up reveals the ceiling glistens and also looks wet. They can inspect the water, even touch it if they dare. But wait 1 second. That isn't water. It's hundreds of black puddings. I would jump in for a swim if I were them. Oh, and the glistening ceiling? More of them, just waiting to drop on anyone foolish enough to fly close enough. It's up to you and them to figure out the solution, depending on what you'll allow. Now, the second scenario, we head to the castle of Lord. He has invited the adventurers to a grand feast for defeating he that I shall not name. Everyone of importance is here, but before the feast begins, partygoers start feeling a little ill. Many have grasped at their throats or stomachs and grimaced in pain, falling to the ground. All of the affected have only one thing in common. Each were drinking the blackberry elven wine. At least, hopefully, the party investigates and notice it, because guess what? Someone has filled the wine barrels with black pudding. No, remember, not the kind you eat, the kind that eats you. Perhaps it was leftover cultists from he I shall not name. Or maybe those snooty elves have had enough of their neighbors. It could always be Lord's wizard, mad that he didn't get credit for defeating he I shall not name. I'll leave that up to you to finish off. The third and final scenario for the episode takes us to the dungeons of the newly crowned king of the land with no name. He was the fourth in line to be crowned king in less than a month. He has sent out a writ, looking for adventurers to help find out what has happened to his siblings, and to keep it from happening to him. After a little background work, the adventurers find out that he is from his father's third wife. Easy as can be, she must have killed the others just so her son could have power. Wrong. She has been dead for over 5 years, so unless it's a ghost, they need to look elsewhere. There is only one heir left after the now sitting king, but he is a frail, sickly boy, not physically capable of doing such atrocities. Everyone seems to like him, but in an almost pitying way, all except the king. He truly seems to love his brother and takes him for walks in the evening. He rarely misses a walk, but every night one of the others have disappeared, he had not been able to walk with his brother. The king will show them where they walk, and partway through a long-forgotten path, mostly overgrown, splits off from the main walkway. A piece of cloth can be seen stuck to some of the thorns there. It looks like a tear from the royal cape, a cape worn by all the sitting kings. If the party goes down the path, they will find a large fountain. The water is black and murky, and you can't see to the bottom. On the side of the fountain is a foot and partial ankle. It looks like the metal, flesh, and bone have been eaten away by some strong acid. Inside the fountain, the water moves and lunges at whoever is closest. That's no water. It's black pudding. Wow, that should be like a shirt or something. If they survive the encounter and question the sickly brother, he will break down into tears and confess. The first one was an accident. He always wondered what was down the old pathway, and the king, his father, had walked with him. The thing in the fountain attacked and dissolved the king without a trace. Fearing the worst, he said nothing to anyone. The next in line took the crown, and also took to mistreating the sickly boy. He knew he wouldn't be safe till his true brother was king, so he disposed of the others in the fountain. Wow, that got a little dark. Let's come back from the darkness. Let's leave the chaos a little bit. Alright, back to reality now. Alright, I'm good. Wow, that one was deep. Feel free to change or do however you want with it. Well, Our time is coming to a close once more, my friends. I always like having visitors here into my little slice of chaos. If you enjoyed yourself, please consider giving me a review on your podcast platform of choice, or subscribe and like on YouTube. I hope you can join me next time when we blow the dust off the tomes and look deep within their pages. I might even show you a little glimpse into my mind. And remember, if you are truly chaotic, your players will never know what you'll throw at them next.